My name is Robin Judd, and I'm an associate professor of history, and I specialize in modern European history and modern Jewish history. I also teach and study the history of gender, particularly the history of masculinities. I would say that I'm a cultural historian who works with all different kinds of materials. My research takes me all over the world. I've done research in Israel, I've done research in Germany, in Belgium, in France. I've done research in Canada and the United States, and sometimes I'm in sort of major city archives or state archives, and sometimes I'm looking in somebody's attic or basement. I do oral histories. I interview women and men who were somehow touched in the Second World War, women who survived the Holocaust, men who served in the military during the Second World War. And so I'll be speaking with 80 and 90-year-olds about their lives, about their histories. One of the threads of my research concerns the question of religious tolerance and toleration. Right? What do we mean by tolerance? How do notions of tolerance change over time? Tolerance in the 1800s meant something very different than it meant in the 1900s, and it means something very different today. And I've been very curious as to how do we see similarities and differences over time vis-a-vis how we think about minorities and outsiders in the nation state? How do we treat those minorities and outsiders? And so I think history allows us to look at the past and apply it to the present. Not necessarily argue that it's the same in the past as it is in the present, but rather to better understand the mistakes but also the solutions that we've seen in the past, and then apply it to the present day. I teach a wide range of courses in Jewish history and in European history. I teach the history of the Holocaust, which is a large course, anywhere between 120 to 240 students. It's a big lecture class. My history of anti-Semitism is also fairly large, usually somewhere between 90 to 120 students. But then I teach smaller courses. Modern Jewish history, American Jewish history, European Jewish history, seminars on gender in Jewish history or the historiography of the Holocaust. And I often tell my students that it's going to be in their generation, and I don't say this with like tremendous fanfare or to be overly dramatic, but it's in their generation that they will learn, whether it's on the radio or in the newspaper or on some podcast, that the very last Holocaust survivor has died. They're going to have a special opportunity. They're the bridge. And very often, the first time that my students meet those Holocaust survivors, and for some of my students, it's the first time that they've heard somebody with a European accent, or it's the first time that they've met somebody who's over 80 years old. And many of the survivors who come in are 90 or 92 years old, and it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing that they'll come to OSU and, sit in a chair with the water next to them, and they're shaking a little bit, and their voices are quiet. And they start speaking about what it was like at the age of 15 to be pulled off the street, right, and sent to a forced labor camp. Or what was it like to be liberated? Or maybe for some of my students, they hear, what was it like to liberate a camp? Because we've had some liberators come and speak to our students. It's at that moment that they become really engaged with history, because I think they begin to identify their own responsibility, not to become historians. Not all of our history students become professional historians. But they do become more critical thinkers. They do become individuals who become more engaged with their society in which they live. And they do become people who, when they read the newspaper, take a moment and think about what it is that they've read. That's what I want for my students.